Now I've lost you. Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Hey.
Hi. You're on another window. Okay. Here we go. I think we are live. Fantastic. So let us get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Monique Tallon, and I'm here today with Craig Barlow.
Good evening.
Good evening, good evening. You're joining us from Spain, is that right?
South of Spain, the sunny part.
The sunny part. It makes me even more jealous. So I'll quickly introduce you for those of you who aren't familiar with you, Craig. You are a men's mentor and the creator of the Dark Nights Global Men's Movement, which I'm very curious to hear more about, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to hear about that in our chat today. Of course, you also go by the name The Naked Mountain Man.
I do.
I'm sure everybody wants to hear about that and hear about that as well. But I'm really excited to have you on today. Just a little bit of background about how you and I met. We met on Facebook actually, and I remember seeing your Facebook page and being just kind of impressed by the raw nature of your, Facebook lives and your posts, and just how well you embodied what I call healthy masculine or empowered masculine. And then I found out that you were a men's coach, and so I reached out, and that was sort of how we connected, and we ended up having some lovely chats around feminine masculine dynamics and leadership. And so I thought it would be great to have that conversation live and share it with all of our friends on Facebook. And so it's been really great getting to know you and hearing more about the really important work that you're doing in the world. And I'm really excited to have this chance to kind of talk more about it and to hear your perspective from the male perspective, which is why I wanted to have this chat today. So thanks again for being here.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So why don't we just jump right in? And like I said, one of the reasons I reached out to you was because I felt like you really did sort of embody that more empowered masculine. And it's something that I think is really lacking in today's world. There's a lot of confusion, I think, out there, both amongst men and women about what healthy masculinity looks like versus toxic masculinity. And in fact, you and I have had some interesting conversations about some sort of the negative impacts of that term.
Yeah.
And what that's now done for men. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about your definition of healthy masculinity and how that shows up for you in your work.
Okay. So the healthy masculine. Well, I have a kind of, it's almost like a 4 kind of point ethos within the kind of the Dark Knight stuff. It goes kind of courage in the balls, strength in the spine, truth in the heart, and presence in the mind. And it's kind of where you're seeing this primal side of kind of the masculine that we've spoke about, the more primitive kind of, more, might call it like caveman side, and where like a lot of men will sit in that space. And then you got the kind of the soft male, or the kind of I think it's David Dida who calls it he calls it like the kind of wimp ideal. It's like all heart and no spine, and then you've got all spine and no heart. And it's kind of like bringing those two parts together is like, for me, it's like having that being able to access that full range of kind of what you might call the healthy masculine traits, but also the kind of ones that are called the feminine traits too. So it's like that's the heart, I would call just like the heart-based stuff, and kind of having the strength of the masculine as well. So it is being connected into your body, as well as like men mostly being in our heads, and it's like very disconnected from that, from ourselves. So it's kind of really is the kind of talking about embodiment. It's embodying those energetic traits, behaviors, and also, which I find is would be one of the difficult ones, it's the heart part of it as well. It's like, because is the ideal of what masculinity might mean to somebody is like, again, is like there's probably a million different definitions people have of that, but it's like for a lot of men to go into that kind of heart-based part of it means it's like dropping your armor and being open and changing the ideals of maybe what you were taught of what it is to be a man, and like about not having emotions and not having feelings, etc. Is like you're a human being first as well, right? But it's like the ideals and paradigms of what it is to be a masculine man is very, I find, is you have foundational parts of masculinity, but then there's also your own individual masculine expression. So this is where men get lost a lot. It's like, I have to be like this model of what a man is, or this one, and if I'm not, then it's like it's shame. I'm ashamed of myself because I'm not like this. And it's like this, and that's the whole thing of like, where is you have individual expression of masculine, but again, it's like you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. You have to know your individuality, as well as embodying healthy masculine traits like leadership, strength, courage, honesty, and go down the list. It's like safety, trustworthiness. It's like and they're just kind of their human traits as well. We had this discussion before, haven't we? Like the masculine, feminine dynamics is kind of like they're just human traits, but we have to separate them so we can kind of have contrast and kind of learn, so our mind can learn more easily and kind of be able to embody those as well.
Yeah. I know that your personal journey, and I apologize, we should have started with your story first. I know your personal journey has really impacted kind of the work that you do now. And for those of you who don't know you have a military background, I believe. Is that correct?
I do. I was a chef in the Navy from the age of 16 to 30. Because I joined the Navy because when I was about 8 years old, I watched, I don't know if you remember the film Under Siege with Steven Seagal and Tommy Lee Jones, where Steven Seagal was the Special Forces chef who went out and kicked ass on the ship and saved the day. And I was like, I want to do that. So I did. And that's like, that's actually the reason why I joined. But yeah, it's like I was a chef in there for like 13 years. In the Navy, and went off to before I was 19. I was off with Afghanistan and Iraq in 2001, 2003, and I was also straight after that. I was on a ship that crashed into a rock at sea in the middle of Australia and it was sinking, which was fun. So we had to like ground the ship onto a beach on this little island because we were sinking. So my first couple of years were quite eventful in that time. So by the time I was 19, I'd done quite a lot already.
Wow. And so I know that, being in the military, you obviously had this experience of different types of masculine role models and leadership as well, because the military is very hierarchical.
Yeah.
And so you probably got to see a lot of different types of male leadership. How did that impact you personally, and what did you take away from that experience?
I found it like extremely impactful, especially the age that I joined. And again, we've spoke before, is like where this is really important for men is where like father figures and absent father syndrome, let's call it, is like so prevalent in like our culture and our society now, and it's kind of showing up more than ever now. And like having a father that left home when I was 10 and didn't have that order and structure from the masculine that I kind of needed. And so the military for me was like a great place for me. I needed that. I needed that. My family always says like, I'm glad you joined the military because we were afraid that you'd go to jail. And I was like, I wasn't that bad. I misbehaved, but I wasn't like a bad kid. But like that structure, and again, it's like that's part of the masculine as well, is like order. The masculine is order. It's order, it's structure. It's like you have this hierarchy. So without knowing at the time, because obviously afterwards now more awareness and being able to dissect that experience with what I now know and teach is like being able to see is like, oh, it's the order that men need. Men need order. Men need structure. Men need to be around other men. Men need to be around men of all different developments. Like is kind of men need to have people that they kind of bring up and show how things are done, and then like we need that ourselves as well. So it's like it's kind of like just a mass scale mentorship, and having like figures to look up to, and like because you're surrounded in this, it's like 100% of the time 24/7 around hierarchy, structure, order, leadership, direction, is you don't know that it's not normal, it's just normal. But understanding that's not normal for so many men especially, and also women to experience that from men as well. And but also being able to pick out, even at a young age, you can see who are, okay, I'm going to follow you because I like you and I think you're good at what you do, so I want to learn off you, rather than somebody who's a leader, which I'm sure you've never seen in corporate at all, is like where it's like they're not good fucking leaders, they are shit. It's like they don't, it's like they speak the words, but their actions, and this is the thing, isn't it, is like somebody's actions and character speaks louder than their words. And it's like, who are you gonna want to be led by? It's like this person that you respect, because it's like just because someone is in a leadership position doesn't automatically mean that there's the respect.
Right.
And that was a big thing that I learned about that for sure, was like kind of like where is I still, obviously because I was in that environment where I had to do things that people told me, even if I really disagreed with the person, and like you could even have conflict with that, but like somebody I respected, I would work way harder for, because I had so much respect for them, and like kind of I'm learning off you how to be a better person and better leader, but without even kind of consciously knowing that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, leadership is such a broad term, and
Yeah.
you know, there's so many different kinds of leadership styles out there in the world. Of course, I tend to speak about feminine leadership, and how do we balance masculine and feminine qualities in our leadership style as women. But what I haven't done is you know, looked at how do you apply that to male leadership, and it's something that I am really curious about and want to learn more about, from the male perspective. And so I'm curious, when you looked at those leaders that you respected, what qualities did you see in them that made you respect them so much?
One of the main things, they were just very good at their job. They were very good at their job. They were well respected amongst other men. Again, this is a thing between men as well, is like you want to be respected in a group of other men, is like you want to bring value to the table. That's kind of what we look for as well, I feel, is like where we look is like what, and again, this is something I didn't realize I was doing, but I'd kind of filter that through men that I'd hang around with. It was just like outside of that, is just like, he's like, what do you bring to the table? It was like, you should bring something to the table. Doesn't mean you have to be big and strong or whatever. It's like, but you got to bring something. Like, what value and skill do you bring? And that's something that I saw, is just like the guys that were very well respected. They were very good at their job. They were very good at cultivating you as a young leader, let's say, and they were very I found kind of like also very playful as well. I found that a lot. The ones that are really good at their jobs and they're really good at what they did and went far, they were also quite playful. And the ones that weren't were very kind of, you just fucking do what I say and don't argue with me or answer back and like all this kind of bullshit. And it's like, and that's just like, I'm only doing this because I have to do it. It's like, I have zero respect for you as a person.
Mm. So it sounds like when they respected you, you respected them back as a person.
Yeah, I think respect's a big one for sure. Is like in that sense. It's not, again. It's like just because again you're a leader, and I've seen as well. Like I've had friends in the military, and like as soon as they get promoted, they turn into an arsehole.
Mm.
Is like they get on this power trip,
Mm.
and it's like because it's like, oh, you're actually really fucking insecure, and now you've got this kind of power. You feel like you can just fucking. It's just telling people what to do, and that makes you a good leader. Is like, it's not actually. It's like, now I just fucking, you're not my friend anymore, basically. Is just like, and I get that it can like mixing friendship with leadership as well can be kind of a challenging thing, but it's just like you've just shown your true colors because you've got this kind of promotional and kind of responsibility. Let's say it's a responsibility. You've got this extra responsibility now, and how are you going to use that? Oh, to be an arsehole. Okay.
Yeah, and you see that a lot, don't you? I mean, it's the same in the corporate world. You know, the minute somebody gets powerful or gets promoted or has that authority, sometimes that power is ill used, and they can become bullies, or they can become assholes, like you said. And nobody wants to work for an asshole, right? I mean, if I don't like you, then I am not going to do my best for you. It's just that simple.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people forget that when it comes to a leadership context. Especially for women, the likability factor is huge. It's not as much for men because men can get away with just being respected, whereas women need to be respected and liked, which is why it's so important for women to find that balance in their leadership style.
Yeah.
But I think it's also true for men, especially when we talk about that toxic masculinity and how that could show up in a leadership context. I think a lot of times it's when they go to the too masculine side of that leadership tightrope, as I like to call it, and they assert their power over people where it makes people feel powerless. A lot of the times that can create a toxic environment where people just end up checking out and not wanting to really follow that leader and what they have to say. What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that one's kind of like a big topic itself because I think it depends on the environment as well. It depends on the environment where that's happening. You might be in a very high intensity environment where there's a certain expectation of you as a kind of like a team member, and it's like maybe that's not the right environment for you. Maybe it's like maybe it's like you where there's a requirement to be quite direct and straight, and because the volume of intensity in the environment where maybe you're just not made out for that, and it could be where you're not in your right place. And like I can see that like in the military where and especially working in a kitchen and working on a warship in the military is like double, because it's like chefs are mental, sailors are mental, and it's like you got to be a certain type of person to be able to kind of be in that environment, and it's difficult for some people. But it's like if you're going to come into this like especially in a kitchen, it's like you need to like shape up fast as fuck. It's like he's like otherwise you're not going to make it, and you're going to be like you're no use. And so that might seem harsh to some people, but again, that's why I say it depends on the environment. Like I've not worked in corporate. It's like I can only really speak from like military and like in being a kind of leader in a kitchen. It's just like where it's sometimes better to not have that person around at all and just kind of make up the slack with the team members you've got, because it's like just no fucking good, and they don't belong in that environment, and they shouldn't. I'm like, sometimes it's like, how did you get through training? Like some people are like, how do you have, because you obviously have all your basic training, all your chef training, etc., or whatever you're doing, and then you join a ship, you should be at a certain standard. But if they just let them through standards, we just need people, and this drops the standard, and it's just like where some people shouldn't be there in the first place. And that's my experience there. But then again, it's like, obviously as a leader, there's part of that where it's your responsibility to kind of direct them, guide them, and train them. But again, there's also, you've got to adapt to that as well. And it's just, so I think that's very environmental in that case, because again, it's like, from joining at 16 as a young guy, I had to fucking shape up pretty quick, because I was put in these intense environments with very old and bold sailors, and I had to adapt and learn quickly. But it was very, very good for me in my development as a young man. So it's like, I'd say that is completely, can be completely environmental. And like, some people might not like their leaders or bosses or hierarchy, but it might actually not be them. It might not be the leaders. It might be them that actually has the problem.
Sure. Yeah,
Kind
and like as you said, like it's up to the leader to sort of coach and mentor that person and help them get on board. But there are also people who are not coachable, right? And in those instances, I mean, it's really swim, and it's hard to deal with someone who doesn't want to change, or can't change for whatever reason. What do you do in that instance, right? I mean, I think those are the times where you have to make tough decisions on whether that person belongs in that environment or not.
Well, it's like the same as it's like, you're only as, like a team is like, you're only as strong as your weakest member. And sometimes it's like, and you see this a lot in military stuff as well. There's I can't remember what the program's called now, but there's like one where they do this, like people volunteer to go and do this kind of type of military training, and they talk about this in that sense of like, sometimes is like the best thing a person could do is just like go, you know what, is like, I know that I'm pulling the team down and I'm affecting the whole team here, I'm going to remove myself. That's like again, that can be an honorable thing to do, and like very respectful thing to do. If like you just go, you know what, I don't belong here in doing this. I see what my effect is on the team. But then again, there's also the other side of that of going, wow, is like, then it's up to you. Either like, do you invest in this person, or do you kind of cut your ties? And that's part of leadership too, as well, isn't it? It's like, you're not always going to be liked. It's like, as a leader, your job is not to be liked by everything. Otherwise, it's like you're doing what everyone else wants and pleases, isn't it? It's like, not to say you don't get input and feedback and that, but essentially is like, if you're in that leadership position, it's just like, it's your job to fucking lead.
That's right. Yeah, and I know for a lot of women, that's really difficult because we don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Sure.
And so we want to, we just don't want to rock the boat. And sometimes we don't want to offend anybody. And so we might put up with bad behavior, or, not a good performer, because we're afraid to give the feedback or afraid to be direct with them. And that's a disempowered place to be, right? As the feminine, we have to learn how to be direct, but it from a grounded place, right? A lot of times women can tend to be very emotional, or just avoid conflict altogether. And a lot of times that's, people aren't looking for that. People are looking for you to, deal with that issue. If there's a problem with somebody on your team and they're holding everybody back, it's up to you as the leader to deal with that in some sort of effective way. And sometimes it does require making tough decisions or hurting people's feelings or whatever. But at the end of the day, people are going to respect you much more when you make those tough calls, because that's what they're looking to you to do, right? That's your job, right? And like, who else is going to do that? Nobody. I mean, that's really what you're there to do. And so, yeah, I mean, these are kind of like the nuances, right, of how we show up as both men and women in a leadership context. Um, and I think for men, maybe they're not as worried about hurting people's feelings, or worried about, pissing somebody off. Um, but, I think that may show up in a different way for men, right?
Yeah, and like you said at the start, there's so many different leadership styles as well, isn't there? And it's not to say any of them are wrong, but like again, there's ones where you can see like directly is just like where some people are just not good fucking leaders. And that's just as like simple as it comes down to. It's just like, but again, it's like, and not even that, like saying good leaders, it's also is because it's not even being in a leadership position in a work-based environment, isn't it? It's like, do you embody the leadership trait just as a fucking human being? Are you a person that people look to for leadership naturally, because it's just like it's your presence, right? Presence is fucking huge. It's just like if you had grounded presence, and I use this a lot in like military terms of like, say there's a fire or a flood on ship or something going on, which there was quite often, and it's like, who do you look for? Do you look for people that are like panicking and running around and stressed, or if like, did you look for someone who's calm, grounded, and knows exactly what they're doing, is directing? Is like, you're going to look for the calmest person in the room. But again, this is like, I go to more like intense environments because that's what I'm used to. But it's like but it's good. The intensity and the extremities are good because it'll expose you more than anything else. So it's like you're kind of good to be in that because it's like you'll get exposed and it's kind of good for you. But it's like you'll look for the calmest and like groundest person in the room, not the one that's running around screaming. It's like, I don't want you fucking near me right now, because it's like a situation where you need to be fucking calm, you need to be grounded, and you need to know what the fuck you're doing.
Yes, and that's why when I developed the feminine leadership model, I put centeredness right in the middle of that model, because as leaders, we're always putting out fires. There's always something that's going wrong. And it's up to you to be able to be calm and centered and grounded, to be able to come up with the best decision of how to handle that fire, right? And so we talked a little bit about like the fight or flight response, and where do we go when we're stressed, right? Because it's really easy to be a great leader when everything's going fine.
Yeah.
It's really, when the rubber meets the road is really when, shit hits the fan and things are going wrong and people are under extreme stress. There's a deadline to meet or whatever. And, how do you react and how do you show up in that moment? And a lot of times people end up either, going to like the disempowered quadrant, I call in my 4 quadrants of leadership, where you're just, you want to control and you want to dominate. And sometimes in a burning building, that's good. Like you want to have that leadership approach to get people safely out of the building. But, are you showing up with toxic behaviors or healthy behaviors in those moments of stress? And I think that's where, self-awareness comes in really handy. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I know you do a lot of work with men around, looking at themselves in the mirror, kind of doing that deeper work, that self-awareness work. Tell me a little bit about how you lead men through that, because I feel like, at least with women, we have safe containers where we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier for us to kind of look at ourselves and, sometimes we're our like worst enemies. We really are very hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
But I feel like men don't have those safe spaces as much. So tell me a little bit about why you think that's important and why men should find those kinds of opportunities to do that self-reflection.
Okay. So for me, the first thing there is like, in my mind, is like, I always say this is like, men need other men. And it's like, there's nothing I learned more about that than in the military, having that in abundance and then not having that, and kind of struggling in a way. It's that kind of sense of belonging. And there's a kind of tribal aspect for men as well. There's like a tribal aspect being part of that tribe. But again, there's like a lot of men don't have that these days. A lot of men are isolated. A lot of men might not have many actual real, what you would call real solid core friendships. And what are those friendships like? Are they the same as you? And like, or are they kind of more somebody that has probably done their work? Like you say, is like, I think men always need someone that's like to not to look up to, but to kind of as a mentor. Is like, I think there's a mentorship role always in that. And it's like, you can call that, maybe it's like the father figure or father archetype in that. It's like, we always need that. We always need that. But there's like, and why men need those spaces. I think I try to keep things quite simplistic as possible until you need to go deeper. But it's like permission. I think honestly is like a big one's permission. If like men see other men talking about it, doing it, embodying it, it's saying, hey, I've been through this. This is how I felt. This is what was going on, and then is like and this is kind of where I am now. It's kind of like a permission to be. Oh, it's okay to be like that as a man. It's okay to be kind of vulnerable, but what that actually means. And it's like, and it's again, is like in even like having emotions and that. It doesn't mean in a sense of like, oh, women are emotional, so that means I'd be more like a woman. It's like, no. It's like men will do that work differently, and we're quite like direct, and it's but also as well can hold the space, and like being able to get men to kind of to feel, to get into their bodies, to feel, because a lot of men are so in their heads and logic that you ask like, how do you feel? And like, what do you mean? It's like, feelings and shit. It's like, how do you feel? And it's like, because we're very logic and kind of and direct based, but it's, I honestly think permission is one of the biggest ones. And that's why for me is like, the more I kind of grow and develop and go through all this stuff, I'll just fucking talk about it because I don't care. It's just like, it's kind of like, I'm good. I'm not trying to impress anyone or be fucking liked by anyone or whatever. So I'm not bothered about that, because I see this is so important work for men. There's like, I don't really give a shit about what other people might have to say. Is like, I'm going to talk about it because it's fucking needed. And I think when men just seeing that gives them permission to be able to be like, oh, I'm not weak. This is a big one. So like if men actually deal with their shit, internal stuff and their wounds and trauma or emotional stuff, or like his stuff they haven't processed after maybe like a breakup or dysfunctional relationships or whatever with parents or whatever, is that like to say, hey, this doesn't make you weak. This doesn't mean you're not a man and like you're not emasculated. And these are the big things, I think, for sure, because I had them. I went through those. I felt emasculated. I felt weak. I felt really kind of just kind of quite almost like overly sensitive, because it's quite raw. And when you're in that kind of raw state, it's like you can feel oversensitive to everything. And it's like, but it's like, wow, sometimes you just got to go there. And it's like, that sounds very, it is, but it's like, you have to, it's like the way out is the way through. But it's like, if you don't have guidance, you don't have direction with that, which is what we need to navigate through all of that stuff. Because for me, if like guys come to me with stuff, it's just like, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that for me, that in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, that's like textbook. But like, they ain't got a fucking clue what's going on. And it's just like, he's like, they need guidance and navigation through that. And I like to do that quite playfully as well, because it's like, it doesn't all have to be serious. Like, we make everything so serious internally that like, if we can bring a little bit of, I always find if you can bring a little bit of humor into it, it kind of dissolves so much of the heaviness. straight away. And I find that so important. Again, from the military, going in like dark times in there, like going off to war and stuff. And the thing that will always keep you going when you're kind of really up against it is humor. Always is the kind of thing, is like to keep that level of humor in the kind of struggles and kind of tough times.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think playfulness is such an important aspect of being an adult, right? Because we all have that inner child part of us that's kind of like hidden away, and it's not allowed to like
Yeah.
show up in the real world or in a leadership context or work context or military context, whatever. It's like we're all supposed to be like these adults, but really we're just children in big bodies. And the more playful you can be, I think the more authentic, there's a little bit of authenticity that comes from that. And it can take that seriousness out of it, which I think is really important. But earlier when we were talking, you mentioned, not in this conversation, but in earlier conversation, you mentioned this whole concept of feminized masculinity.
Okay.
And this is something that I personally have had a beef with for quite a bit of time. And I know that a lot of women in my circles also kind of complain about this this phenomenon that has occurred, I think, over the last several years, decade or so, of men showing up more on the feminine side of the spectrum. And we're not talking about gender here, because both men and women have feminine and masculine qualities, right? Like that's just the way we are. We have these two polarities, and some of us skew to one side or the other, and it's just the way it is. So we have both. But I just, and it's the same way with women. Like women have tended to skew more on the masculine side of the spectrum, I think, to kind of compensate for that. And so what it's created is this imbalance in the world. And you see that in relationships, you see that in, the way our institutions are created, the way we interact in the world, the way, people are sort of showing up in the world. You see it in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it's created a lot of just frustration, because it's like, where are the men at? Like, where are they? Right. And so, I know you talk a little bit about this, and you to riff on that a little bit.
Well, the men are out there. It's like the men are there, and it's just like, it's absolutely. But it's I think a lot of it is just the lack of one, like healthy role models, for sure. So if you want to go back to kind of origins of it, like in kind of brief, it's like what you see now is like generationally and culturally is like it's like the absent father syndrome, right? It's like, and it doesn't mean, and like we spoke about this, it doesn't mean it is like that can be physically or emotionally. So you could have had a father that's there but just not emotionally, or was not a kind of what you might call a healthy embodied role model of the masculine. But that's your experience of it, so that's what you get. But if you've got absent father, then like this is what the women will do. The women will go, well, I take up the role. That's like is what women will do, that, won't it? Automatically, it's like women will take into that role. But then it's like women can't do the role of a father. It's like it's not, and like it's like sometimes you'll get that. It's like, well, I can do this by myself. It's like I can do that job. It's like you can't do that job. It's like you can't. It's like you need that male masculine presence and guidance and direction. And if that's been missing, is like men have this attachment to the feminine, right? And it's just like it's present in like school. If your school is like the majority of teachers are generally female, and it's like you're taught to be a nice boy Be a nice boy, don't fight, don't be rough and tough and all that sort of stuff. Don't fight, be a nice boy, cultivate your lighter side of your personality. It's like you're never really encouraged to cultivate your darker side or your more primal side of your masculinity. And then you grow up with this kind of almost like it's like you can father wounds or mother wounds, is like where you are as a guy growing into adults, is when you have this attachment to the feminine where it's like to please and to be kind of nice. And if I'm nice to women, I need to be nice to women. I don't mean like the opposite of nice being an arsehole, by the way, as well, either. It's like, but being overly nice and like, and this is what I'm supposed to do. And it's like people please. And, you know, yes, anything you say is like, and then it's like, wonder why women eventually like just get turned off and kind of dismiss that. And it's like, men can be left like, what the fuck? It's like, what did I do wrong? And it's like, it's not necessarily done wrong. It's just like, it's, you kind of, you're in one part, you're in that kind of, that your heart might be in the right place, but it's like, where's your fucking primal side?
Mm-hmm.
Where's your kind of raw kind of masculine side? And it's like that balance, like you say, it's that like we were talking about the kind of the spine and the heart together. So rather than being all spine, which is kind of bravado, disconnected, disconnected from your heart and emotional wise because of the ideals of what it is to be a man, but then on the other side it's all heart and you've got no spine to back it up,
right?
And that's like a big part of the problem. So it's kind of like men in a way going back and like and that's a lot of what we'll do, is go back and go through these developmental stages to kind of go, look, this is where this will come from, this is where this will come from, this is what's happened, so you can go, oh shit, it's like I'm not fucked, it's like it's not something wrong with me, it's like I'm not emasculated, I'm not weak, it's just like I've skipped some very important developmental stages and guidance and direction that I fucking need, and it's like uncomfortable to go through that as an adult man, and to go back and to kind of develop that now in kind of adult life that you kind of should have had as a boy. And that's what is like, I would say, is like the feminized kind of masculinity, sure. And it's kind of like where it's where women have the control as well, like in a relationship format. It's like women is like, if it's controlling women or women in their masculine taking the lead, that's not women's fault. It's kind of like what they've gone into, because they will take up that slack. But what it is, but it's like, that's where a guy is like, don't ask permission to take the lead or take the control in that, because it's like, and even women might resist, because it's like they don't trust. Mm-hmm. They don't trust the masculine, because that's what they've learned. It's like, I have to do this by myself. I have to just trust myself and be independent and shit. And it's like, it's being able to like, it's not even like for a man, I feel it's not about is asking permission to kind of take. It's no, you lead, you say no, you have boundaries, you say your needs as a man. And it's like, actually, you'll find like a lot of the time women will respond to that. Maybe not at first, maybe the control will maybe try and stay there because that's what they've learned it's to do. But it's like about them being able to like drop their armor, because it's like, oh, I can fucking trust him, I can rely on him. It's like, he can lead. He's like, it's like kind of like, hey, I've got you kind of thing. And then that like, then that will help in a relationship format for kind of women to kind of go, and just fucking breathe, and for men to take that kind of masculine role. And then that's like where you get your kind of holding your poles then. But I believe, for me, in that, this is why the masculine is so important, because it's the masculine that initiates.
Yes.
With that.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of like a big generalization, but it's kind of like, it's something that is seen, and it's like, and I have that too, is like in relationship where I can see that behavior, because I kind of know that and I can see it. I'm go, oh, this is what's going on, and I'm just like, no. And then it's like, my partner will say to me, is like, I really like it when you say no.
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, and again, it's just like, because they don't want you to be like a yes man
Right.
all the time. Is they kind of want that to, like, for you to be that kind of masculine presence, and not is, it's kind of a test. I see that as like a feminine testing. It's like a feminine testing to say, basically, to prod and poke and to do that shit, to say, can I trust him? Can I feel safe, so I can kind of drop my guards down and kind of relax more and not have to fucking be the leader and the one in control all the time, because that's what I've learned. Because a lot of women have learned that, like, that men maybe not be trustworthy, or may not be the one to rely on to lead. But there's again, it's a kind of a back and forth. But for me, as a man, I feel, well, in my relationships too, is like, that's for me to step up into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like the woman will really kind of drop away. It's like, she will, of course she fucking will.
And I think deep down inside, women want to do that, right? But
yeah,
there's such a taboo, and I'm sure there are people who are going to be watching this who are going to think that we're like blaspheming right now, because it's such a kind of this like polarized topic, because women feel like in order to be empowered, they have to lead all the time, and that men should let them do that, right? And it's like, well, who are you to tell me that I can't lead or I shouldn't lead? I want to lead, and so therefore I will. Well,
Sure.
It's not about that. Of course you can lead. You're a woman, you're smart and you're capable, and nobody is questioning that. But at what point does that go against your own nature?
Nature,
Right?
isn't it?
And there is such a thing as nature. There is such a thing as what feels comfortable and authentic. And I know that for myself, yes, I'm very headstrong. I'm a born leader. I could lead an army. But do I want to do that? Is that going to take more energy and more testosterone and more chemicals in my body in order to do that? Absolutely. I have to go against my own chemical makeup in order to take that role.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I know for myself what it did is I had adrenal burnout because my body couldn't handle it anymore. And I couldn't work for a year because I was totally spent. It was exhausting having to always be in that leadership role. And so I think that's what happens to a lot of women. You know, we tend to take on that role, whether it's at home, in our relationships, in the workplace, and we don't allow men to step in and take leadership because we've been told that we need to be empowered. We need to prove ourselves, prove our value, that we can do this, that we're smart enough and capable enough to do it just like men. Well, guess what? We've proved it. I think we have. And it's not really working for anybody because it makes men feel totally disempowered and emasculated and confused. And it makes women feel the same. It makes us feel not feminine, unable to really soften and allow, that feminine nature to come through. And it's exhausting.
And there's a thing with that as well, like where, and it's not always like where, for men as well, where like you have to lead all the fucking time as well. It's just like where, you're human too. You need to rest and like not use like carry the world on your shoulders all the time. It's just like where there might be times where it's just like you are like, you know what? It's like, I need to fucking rest. And it's like in a relationship format, because I think that's the easiest one to talk about within like masculine and feminine, is like where the woman will pick up the slack in that, and it's like, and you can have the shared leadership in that, and she'll probably want to, because it's like, because of you are in your masculine and you do that predominantly for her, then she's going to want to fucking show up for you. Of course she is. But also there's like something else you said in that too, is the like women leading is like, yeah, of course women can lead. It's like anyone can lead, but it's like if you're talking about like in, for example, in like the corporate or anything like that, is forgetting like at the very core of like, and again, kind of a generalization, but just for contrast, it's like where men's bodies and biologically are built for that shit. They're built to go out. They're built to handle that stress, to go out and compete.
That's right.
And build shit. And it's just like where, but what you find is like where if women are like, oh, this is how I have to lead, so I have to be in competition with men, it's just like, I'm like, good luck with that. It's like, not to say that you couldn't in that environment, because obviously there's a shit ton of fucking high level female leaders out there. But it's just like, he's like, if you're trying to compete with the men and like the masculine mind, that's like you being in your masculine, you're trying to be in a masculine and compete with men in the masculine. It's just like, good luck with that. It's like your body is going to be fucked. It's because you're not built for that in that way, to compete with men in this kind of way. And it's just like where, and that can be where a lot of the like resentment can come towards men too, because it's just like, well, and it's like saying a men's world, yeah, because men is like, as nature partly is to go out and fucking build and purpose and all this sort of stuff. It's like, it's kind of natural, not to all men, but to a lot who take that, it's like, it's something that is innate in us. But again, it's like women trying to come into that place and go, I'm going to do this and I'm going to compete with you guys at the highest level, and then going to fucking probably burn out.
Yeah, it's like asking men to, give birth.
Yeah,
It's not in
no,
their nature.
right, thanks.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's not, they haven't figured out how to do that yet. Maybe they will at some point, but
Yeah,
it's like, that's not what you're built for. You are built to go into battle. You are built to go and build things. You're built to go and defend, whatever, your home, your territory, your family, whatever. And I was telling you earlier that I'm obsessed with this show called Outlander that's about this Scottish Highlander in the 18th century. And I was like, why am I so like obsessed with this show? And I realized it's because the main character, Jamie Fraser, he is this like warrior, Scottish warrior, right? And he's just that like masculine, primal, raw, dude that is all about honor and protecting the honor of his wife, the woman he loves, and his country. And he embodies that masculinity in such a real way. And I was like, I just miss that energy around me, because I don't find that very consistently. And I think as women, especially in the workplace, like you said, if we try to show up that way and compete, it just, you can do it for a while, but you have to grow a pair of balls in order to do that. And for a lot of women, it comes at a great cost. And so, what I teach is stepping into your feminine power in order to lead from that place, which is a completely different leadership style than men show up with. And it's a lot more aligned with our bodies, with our nature, with our authentic selves, right? It's this more grounded, intuitive, empathic place to lead from, that can be highly, highly effective when done right. And balanced with some of the masculine things like being decisive and assertive and all these things that are important. But if we're constantly trying to be that kind of more masculine way, it goes back to what you said. No one's going to like you. No one's going to respect you. No one's going to want to work for you.
And it's kind of, again, is like to kind of, I think for me to reiterate the point of just like where it's like there's nothing wrong with women being in their masculine energy. Is like we said before, is like what flavor of that is it? Like, is it unhealthy? Is it healthy? But like again, it's like where being that, but can you go into your femme as a woman too? And it's like, again, it's like if you have a scale of 2 points of one side's feminine, one side's masculine, everyone's gonna sit a kind of a natural kind of a ticking point of like where they naturally sit. And that could be more balanced in the middle. It could be more towards in the masculine side. It could be more towards in the feminine side for both men and women. And it's just like, but knowing yourself and knowing where you naturally sit in that and kind of operating from that place and being able to kind of, and this is why I use like the masculine and feminine dynamics, because it's actually like a lot of it's energetic too. And it's like you can, and the unhealthy aspects are like your shadow side as well, and like your wounds and stuff like this. So it's a great kind of map and a model to kind of incorporate into with other things too. But it gives you a broader range of being able to access certain traits or behaviors and when they're needed. And that's for me is the biggest thing, is just like where, and you feel, well, I do anyways, like I always feel more grounded. The more work I do in that, I feel more grounded in myself, because I know myself so much more in depth and understand myself. Is like where I know I can go in uber masculine mode. Is like, I know that because of the military, I knew that anyway, but I can also go into the softer side, and I can be present, and I can listen, and I can have compassion, I can have empathy and this. But my natural side is definitely in the fucking in the more masculine aspect. Again, that's why it's like military for me, is I absolutely loved it, because you were free to kind of be that like primal aspect in there, and it was everywhere, and it was like it was acceptable. Where sometimes I think why men struggle with that too is because it's like it's kind of seen, that can sometimes be seen as like, I know I hate the fucking phrase, but like toxic masculinity, and it's like is by that primitive expression of masculinity.
Yeah, and that's exactly, what drew me to your work, is that I think you're trying to redefine that for men, and really make it safe for men to show up in a masculine way, which is to be direct, which is to be strong, to be courageous, to be truthful, to be honest, to have a spine, to make that okay for men. Right.
And to be who you are, more importantly, is like to be who you are, and like what is your expression of your masculine. So as a man, that's the thing, is like I don't it's like looking, and you can look, I look at men for different traits and stuff like that you kind of admire, and like is like, because obviously it's in you, so that's why you see it. But like also as well is just like where it's I have that, like I've said to you before, I'm like 6'3", 90 something kilos, is like I'm pretty strong, is like I work out all the fucking time, because I love that. I love that shit. But it's like I don't think another guy is less masculine because he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like this primal thing as well. It's like it's actually like a lot of that is sexuality as well. So a lot of men repress their sexuality, and that is like a primitive part of us, is like suppressed sexuality, because it's like it's deemed as bad. And like with things like Me Too and all these sort of things, is just like it's kind of like some men have like fear around their sexuality, so they repress it, and that energy is so strong that it's like it's gonna come out in other areas, unhealthy habits, unhealthy behavior, addictions, and it's gonna fuck you over. And this is why for me it's like where I always say about like a lot of the time about men tapping into and kind of going into their dark side as well as their heart-based side, but going into that dark side where a lot, like that is where a lot of men's shame is as well. And it's like that's a massive one for men that lives in that, and especially around their sexuality and many other things. But it's just like where you've got to let that out. It's going to destroy you if you don't. And it's just like, but like men, I think men, like we think this is like, it's just us and nobody else has that. And I have this like come up a lot with men kind of asking me questions around that. And again, it's just kind of like, it's like textbook. So if you've seen the same shit all the time, there's patterns, right? That's what you kind of like, I look for. I mean, we said this, we're quite kind of practical with a lot of this stuff as well. And it's like, if there's patterns, there's fucking patterns. It's like, you can't deny that. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the sexuality piece is super important for men and for
Mm.
women,
Oh,
right? I mean,
absolutely,
there's a
absolutely, sure,
lot of shame around
100%.
feminine sexuality and us being able to express ourselves without being shamed.
Yeah,
I mean, that's like a whole other topic that we
yeah,
could
yeah,
get
yeah,
into
yeah,
for hours, and it's fascinating, but it's all intertwined with one another. And
yeah,
anything that's suppressed, right? Anything that you suppress is going to show up in toxic behavior.
yeah,
And so all that toxic masculinity stuff, I think, comes from our culture where it isn't allowed. Healthy sexuality isn't really even role modeled for us. Um, and so we
mm,
don't really have roadmaps for that. But especially for men, because men are so highly, sexualized or highly
yeah,
sexual beings, they just are. um, they need to be, otherwise how do we procreate? Like, it's just, again, nature.
yeah,
Anatomical facts of life. um and that energy is what needs, it's like, how do you channel that energy
yeah,
in a positive and healthy way? So that there's just so much work to be done in that area for men and women, I think. And it's all kind of connected to that stuff. So yeah, I mean, this stuff is really, it fascinates me. It's my life's work. Obviously it's your life's work, and we could continue talking about it for a long, long time. Maybe we'll do another one of these,
yeah.
sooner than later. But it's been really fascinating talking to you, and I want to give a couple of minutes to you to talk about some of the programs you have upcoming. I know you're launching a few really cool programs for both men and women. So do you want
Yeah.
to tell people about that?
Sure. Well, the first and foremost, I have a women's program called Raw, which starts on the 4th of May. So that's like next week, like next Tuesday or something like that. And go into a lot of that, like go into a lot of the masculine wounding for women, and the kind of what I would call is like the wild woman side, which is like the shadow side of for women as well. So it's kind of is we go into that quite a lot, and core wounds. And yeah, that starts on 4th of May for 4 weeks, that is. And you can find these on my social medias, by the way, on my Facebook, Craig Barlow, and my Instagram, The Naked Mountain Man. And the Dark Nights, which is the men's stuff that I've just kind of like brought out now. I've kind of rebranded men's specific stuff now, and I have an Instagram which is Dark Nights kind of underscore men, and
Dark Nights with a K, right? Just to make
yes, yes,
people
yes, yes,
understand.
yes,
Nights with
yes.
a
Dark.
K.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dark Knights with a K underscore men, and I have a 6 week program going through like just taking men back to foundations and just to lay better foundations for them to build better structures on for themselves and in all areas of their life. And we go into a lot of stuff that we spoke about and more. And that starts on the 19th of May. But also on the same Instagram page, there's a link for a free Telegram group for men, where there's like, we have a chat group and a broadcast group in there that I've just put up today. So that's fresh now, and that's like a place. And again, that's one of those places for men to go to. Is like, if
Yeah,
they don't know what to do, and just come into there. But yeah,
I love
that's
that.
yeah,
That's
and also as well, also one to one. I do one to one mentorship with both men and women as well. So
great. Awesome. So yes, everybody check out Craig's Instagram page, his Facebook page. I'll put a link to it or tag you in this video so people can find you. I think you're doing excellent work in the world, and super honored to have met you and to have had this conversation. Thank you so much for making the time. And I think we'll have to do this again and keep the conversation going. So thanks so much, Craig. Really appreciate it.
awesome, and my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite as well. It was very enjoyable for sure.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
See you later.
See you later.